Hello again, and welcome to the Mind Renovation Nation show, brought to you by your go-to source for institutional style property management of small multifamily rentals, Red Maples. I am your host, Nathan Bush. In each show, I share with you real-life examples and real-world examples of our real estate experience. We invite industry experts, innovators, influencers to dive deep into the challenges facing small multifamily rentals. And this show helps you and guides you through your understanding of market research, setting up your effective management systems, and ensuring you're maximizing returns while minimizing expenses. Together, let's unlock some knowledge and tools you need to completely and truly succeed in small multifamily rental real estate. If you want more of these types of resources on a regular basis, you can subscribe to my YouTube channel, or you can head over to www.nathanbushmba/subscribe. That's www.nathanbushmba.com/subscribe. And while you're there, also check out some of the resources I have on my website. Check out some of the resources in the links down below. Today's topic, we are talking all about why your tenants are destroying your property. Why your tenants are destroying your property. This information today may be some of the most critical, best information that we've had on the show yet, and may be some of the best information to help you, the small multifamily real estate investor, to succeed at what you're trying to accomplish. Now, I do have to make sure that I give one more thanks to our sponsor, and that is Red Maples. If you're looking for a portfolio assessment of your rental property, meaning you're trying to determine the profitability, you're trying to understand what's going on with your rentals, maybe you're trying to understand why you're not making money or why you're making a boatload of money, go over to www.red-maples.com/assessment. That's red-maples.com/assessment for your free, no obligation, comprehensive real estate portfolio assessment. All right, guys. So I said the question to start off with was why your tenants are destroying your property. And I know you might be thinking, I've never had a problem with tenant damage before. Maybe that's you. Maybe you've never had a problem with tenant damage before. Tenants leave your properties currently, they're sparkling, crystal clean, and ready for the next tenant or resident. That's okay. There's still a lot of information you're going to be able to garner from today's show. In addition to the information that you're going to be able to garner from today's show, maybe it just hasn't happened to you yet. And so I think it's important to pay attention and have the tools and resources ahead of time before you go into a situation where tenants are destroying your property. Maybe this is you here. Maybe you feel, I don't have the time to deal with all the things that you're about to share with me, Nathan. I just try to get some basic information from your show, but I kind of have my own way of doing things. And if that's you, that's totally understandable. Being a proper property manager can be time consuming, but implementing these preventative measures are what's going to help you, the real estate investor, to be able to be better prepared up front so that you're not dealing with these time consuming, costly things on the back end of your tenant relationship. Or maybe this is you, okay? If this is you in my audience, I totally understand. You don't want to alienate your tenants by being too strict. And when I first started in property management, I will tell you that was very similar to how I was. I did not want to alienate my tenants by being too strict. But by establishing clear expectations and enforcing them consistently doesn't mean that you have to be a tyrant. Open communication, regular inspections, prompt responses to maintenance requests. These are all things that you can do to show the tenants that you care. Now, I've got some slides to take you through that might be a little bit hard to see if you've never had to deal with this before. But unfortunately, at Red Maples, we take over management from other managers all of the time. And some of the times we see dinner time just like this, or we see the grease wall in the kitchen. Or one of the things that we might see on a regular basis is the damage to the walls or all the garbage that's left inside of a home when we have to evict a tenant and get rid of a tenant that's a non-paying tenant that can't take care of the property anyway. I don't know about you, but have you ever seen a home like this? Welcome to the bathroom, right? This is not the type of property that we want turned back over to us. This is not, this is the type of thing that is thousands and thousands of dollars in costly repairs. I mean, this is just what's in the closet. Or just how about damage to door frames in general? These things can add up and can be extremely expensive. And if you can take the proper necessary precautions, you too might be able to avoid some of these costly mistakes. So before we get into what specifically to do, we have to understand some things as a Mind Renovation Nation. We have to understand some things. What I want to understand and what I want to break down before I get into some of the solutions and the framework for the solution is I want to get into this thing, the 4 psychological principles that you got to overcome in order to make sure that your tenants leave that property in great condition. The first psychological principle that you have to overcome if you want your tenants to leave your property in great condition is this lack of ownership. The second is this feeling of anger or frustration that might come up during the relationship. You might have to overcome the psychological principle of vandalism or mental illness. They're all real things that we deal with in rental real estate all day, every day. Now, I've got a slide here, and it's a pretty complex slide because it's the psychological ownership theory that was adopted by some famous psychologist. In fact, I have the source at the bottom of the screen. I can send you the slides if you need to get into the details of understanding this psychological principle. But the psychological principle is that of the psychological principle of ownership. And what it says is basically your effectiveness and your ability to communicate your self-identity, those root motives create control. So your desire to be able to manipulate something so that you get a certain outcome, right? Your identity that you put into something, that creates a sense of control. That's the behavioral trait in this psychological model. Then you have your desire for your own identity, that 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 community identity, self-identity that you're trying to communicate, and a place that you dwell or some place that you stay, or psychologically where you're at. Those two things create this intimate knowledge of what's going on. This is your awareness. These are your inputs, right? This is your taste, feel, smell, sight. That's where you dwell, right? So those two things create this intimate knowledge of your surroundings. And the place you dwell, along with your simulation of where you want, that creates your investment or yourself. These 3 behavioral pathways, control, immediate and intimate knowledge, and investment, these 3 things create ownership, psychological ownership, a feeling of openness, accessible, available, attractive, visible, and my ability to manipulate or control that environment or situation. Those things give me ownership in a property. So the more we can give the tenant that feeling of ownership, the more likely they are to take care of the property because they don't actually own the property. Well, you're like, well, Nathan, I don't want them to paint the walls pink, and I don't want them to drill holes in all over the walls because that'll do more damage and be costly when the tenant moves out. Yes, and maybe it's not the fact that the tenant wants to paint the wall pink or drill holes in the wall. Maybe it's just the feeling of control that they have in the situation to be able to do some of the things that they want to do. We'll get more into that in just a second, but I just wanted to give you kind of an overview of this whole concept, this psychological concept that we call control. The second psychological concept that you're going to have to understand if you do not want a bunch of damage done to your property is this concept here: anger and frustration. And you can thank the Cadence Psychological Center that did all of this research that came out with this blow your stack image that we have on the screen right now. At the base of this blow your stack image, we have minor annoyance. Then we have irritation. People move then through resentment, anger, rage to fury. This is the process that people who have sound psychological health go through whenever they get mad or frustrated or angry. As a property manager, I have to ask you the question, are you fueling feelings of out of control or uncontrolled energy? Are you fueling feelings of shouting and swearing and throwing objects? Or are you fueling their feelings of withdrawal, cutoff, communication just by your business practices? If you're fueling these things, maybe it starts off with them just a minor frustration or something that's very, very little that wouldn't matter very much to you or I. But because they have this anxious feeling and they feel that the communication's been cut off or withdrawn from them, that they don't hear from you, they don't have professional, proficient, and profitable property managers that are taking care of them, then what ends up happening is that withdrawal of communication, that cut off communication, because look, I get it, you're a busy professional. You're working hard, you got a job, you got your real estate portfolio on the side. This is what aspires. This is what elevates from just resentment to anger, and shouting and swearing starts happening. This is where maybe throwing objects happens. And if you were standing in front of them and you pressed on this anger even further, they might even hit you, but they can't hit you. So what do they hit instead? So you got to understand this elevation of anger and frustration in order for you to be able to have a property that's profitable. And it takes competency in your communication and in your relationships with these tenants to have a professional and proficient relationship with these tenants in order to ensure that they don't blow their stack and end up doing additional thousands of dollars worth of damage to your property. All right, the next psychological concept that we have to talk about before I can even get into the solution on what to do. The next thing that you have to be aware of is there are people who will do vandalism to your property. This is a desire to cause harm, a sense of entitlement, a lack of respect for property. Most people jump to this when they think about tenants who do damage to the property, and not ownership issues, and not anger and frustration issues. They immediately jump to the tenant is vandalizing my unit. And there is a sense of understanding of vandalism that has to happen and things you need to do to protect yourself from vandalism. However, this isn't the majority of the cases. This truly is not the majority of the cases. If there is a sense of vandalism in somebody, it's because of their unwillingness to do the right thing. They want to inflict harm on somebody else. I don't know where they get those feelings from, though. It's an interesting thought process. Maybe it comes from this lack of ownership into the property. I don't know. And lastly, most people might jump even a little further than vandalism and just say that it's mental illness. And look, you have to be respectful of your tenant's privacy. Don't share your tenant's personal information with anybody when it comes to dealing with somebody who you believe has mental illness. Avoid making assumptions about your tenant's mental illness. Not all people with mental illness are the same, and it's important to avoid making generalizations about people, which is one of the reasons why I wanted to show you this entire process of understanding the psychology of a tenant who might do destruction to your property and what is probably the most likely to least likely aspects of why your property is being destroyed. Try not to be a psychiatrist or psychologist or even a counselor. Don't diagnose or treat your tenant's mental illness. This is the job for qualified mental health professionals. You might need to contact an attorney who specializes in landlord-tenant law before making any decisions on how you're going to deal with the tenant moving forward. And so you got to be prepared to take action if your tenant's behavior becomes a safety hazard. If your tenant is behaving in a way that's dangerous to themselves or others, you might need to contact authorities. Okay? This is why it's so imperative that you understand these 4 different psychological stages that your tenant may be dealing with, psychological challenges or behaviors that keep you from being profitable in your rental property. If you're looking to make a profit in your rental property, you have to understand the psychology of why people do what they do in order to be able to put policies, procedures, and practices in place that make you professional, proficient, and profitable. Ooh, can't say that 3 times fast. All right. I want to talk a little bit about this biblical principle before we go too much further today as well. In Matthew 22, verse 37 through 39, Jesus replied, "Love the Lord your God with all of your heart, with all of your soul, with all of your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." You got to remember that Jesus, in this exact passage where he was dealing with this message and delivering this message to the Pharisees, he had just got over a very tedious debate with the Sadducees. The Sadducees were trying to trap Jesus and try to demonstrate his lack of technical knowledge for the spiritual world. And Jesus actually prevailed and delivered a wonderful answer that answered all of their challenges from a technical way. Then the Pharisees came in a general way, and they were trying to challenge Jesus on what is the greatest commandment of all of the commandments, saying that one was greater than another. And this is what Jesus said to that. He said, "Love your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the first and greatest commandment. The second is like it, love your neighbor as yourself." Before I give you the technical things to do, before you learn what the great thing is that you can do to stop tenant damage, I submit to you the first need that your tenants have is that you love God and you love them before you do anything. Please don't be the landlord that's out for profitability, proficiency, and professionalism for your own sake. Be the type of landlord that's out for professionalism, proficiency, and profit because of what you can do in the world. You have to love people before you can help people correctly. You have to love God before you do anything in this world of anything worthwhile. Because if I was to take this completely secular, you have to seek and love the truth. You have to be willing to do the right thing. You have to be focused on being innovative and a partner with others. Until you can seek that out first, beyond all things, and love that, it's going to be real hard to do the right thing by tenants that then in turn are going to not do the right thing and destroy your property. And if you love the tenant, then all of those psychological things that we talked about, those can be overcome with care about another human being. So here's the framework, if you're talking technicality, for preventing damage in your property. Here's the framework. You have phase 1, pre-tenancy. You have phase 2, during tenancy. You have phase 3, conflict resolution. And you have phase 4, which is ultimately post-tenancy. I'm going to share with you phase 1 today. What you can do pre-tenancy to ensure less damage on your property and that your tenants don't want to destroy your property. There are 3 parts of phase 1 that you have to be proficient at and professional at if you want to be profitable in property management. Here's the first one, tenant screenings. You've got to be able to do good tenant screenings. Number 2, you've got to set clear expectations. And number 3, having a move-in inspection. Those 3 things alone are the things that you professionally and proficiently can do to ensure that you're more profitable. So let's talk about tenant screenings for a second. It's important to have a good credit reporting system, but one of the unique things that we have access to through our software platform is a rental screening criteria. It includes more than just credit score. It includes actually all kinds of information including criminal background history, rental history, if there's any evictions or that types of things in the tenant's credit. And it gives us a overall AI score as to the likelihood of the success of that tenant in your rental property. That's just the screening aspect of it. Included in our screening aspect of it is a rental verification with previous landlords and an employment verification. Why? Because if you love the truth, then you seek it out in all situations. And you have to thoroughly understand this tenant's financial capabilities to be able to take care of your property. It is not to your advantage as a landlord to put a tenant into your property who cannot afford to pay the rent. And any tenant who can afford to pay the rent has no challenges providing you the information that you need in order to make the decision to move into your property. What happens is most landlords get desperate and they can't find somebody who's financially qualified. And so what they do is they shove anybody in their property. What does that do? That creates these psychological barriers that we just talked about because the landlord didn't take the time to love the tenant and do what's right by them. Sometimes the hard thing is to say no to somebody, and it's okay. There's a big fat decline on this credit report right here. It's okay that I told this tenant no. Here's the next thing, clear expectations. So talking about clear expectations. One of the challenges and one of the most frustrating parts for a tenant is not understanding their payment options and responsibilities and not understanding how the money reconciled prior to moving in. It is in your best interest and the tenant's best interest before the tenant moves in to set clear boundaries. Number one, did they provide you their utility account information? Did they get the utility set up in their name? Do they understand all of the charges that they're going to be charged when they move into the property? Do they know that you have that pet fee? Yeah, you told them, but did they hear you and did they see it and did they acknowledge it? Number three, do they understand that their next month's rent is going to be due because they just moved in on the 23rd and all you charged them for was the prorate? Or maybe they moved in on the 23rd and you're collecting the prorate in next month's rent and they don't understand what you're collecting. See, this is why this account reconciliation form is so important. Number two, why the payment option and responsibility form is so option is because it sets a clear expectation about paying rent. Look, if we can set clear expectations ahead of time with people, guys, it alleviates a lot of frustration and anger on the back end. Plus, if tenants know how to pay their rent and when to pay their rent by, they're much more likely to pay their rent on time, thus alleviating a lot of frustrations on the backside of all of that stuff. Look, I want to set some clear expectations for you, small multifamily rental Mind Renovation Nation. You have got to do the professional work or you're offending and angering a lot of people out there. You want to know why there's damage being done to your property, why you're tuning into this program, why you want to know how to solve it? Can I be real frank and direct? Most of the injury that you're inflicting on them is being redirected and attacked against you. You've got to do the work to make sure that the person on the other end is cared about and is communicated with and is cared for and is loved as a human being. Receive the same respect and honor and integrity and just outright care that you would expect to receive. But so many times we rush through this part. We don't want to do this work. We don't want to take the time to do this work. That's okay. What ends up happening is damage to the property. All right. Back to the information here. The last thing that we can do, so we talked about tenant screenings. We talked about setting clear expectations. Now, the third thing that you can do that really helps to set you up for success is to have a documented move-in inspection. Why? Number one, it's professional. Number two, Giving the tenant the ability to walk through the property and tell you the damage that was there ahead of time tells that tenant or signals to that tenant that you're going to be checking this when the tenant moves out. If you have the documentation ahead of time, the tenant understands that you took the documentation ahead of time. In addition to these things, you can see here, it's very, very tiny, but I circled it in red, that we actually put for the refrigerator that it was new. We actually took the time to let the tenant know that we know that their refrigerator and stove's new. And so here's what you get whenever you follow this kindness, this caring, this appropriate professional philosophy of property management. You could be like those investors that I showed you photos of their home before at the beginning of this presentation. If you missed it, you can rewatch this on YouTube. You can go find the clips on Facebook and rewind it if you want to see what a destroyed property looks like that was not taken care of by a tenant who didn't care. Or you can lead on this philosophy. And remember, I told you this was just pre-tenancy. You can have the tenant move out of the property and it pretty much be ready to go for the next tenant. It's all about in the pre-tenancy screenings, setting clear expectation, and the move-in checklist. You do those three things and you're going to be in a much better position in order to have success with your property. All right, so I don't want you to just invest. I want you to be able to invest with confidence and not confidence tricks. So if you, that's why I gave you this real world information, tools and resources that we use at Red Maples. And if you need help, again, let Red Maples guide your real estate management so you can focus on investments that work best. Subscribe for more insights and reach out for property management excellence if you want our help with this. Look, if you want to join a community of savvy investors, share your successes and invite others to benefit from the information that Red Maples is putting out. Utilize this information as a resource. Send it to an investor who you know who's dealt with some tenant damage issues, and you can ensure then that investor has the information and the resources and the tools they need. And make sure that you follow us for real estate insights and management tips that will help elevate your practice, making it more professional, proficient, and more profitable in your endeavor. So I want to make sure I take a second. There is an open call. If you're in real estate and you're an investor and you have some very profitable insights, very professional insights, or very proficient insights, I'm going to recommend that you reach out to me. I'd like to be able to share your story. Maybe you disagree with everything that was on my show today. That's fine. We can have that conversation. Or maybe you've got additional tools and resources that I just missed today. You're saying, Nathan, you should have done this. You should have talked about that. If that's you, reach out to me. I'd love to have you on the show. I'd love to showcase and highlight some of your investment career and things that you've done. I love celebrating the successes of others, guys. And so if I can be a resource for you to be able to share that success with my community, please reach out. I'd be happy to do so. And lastly, I want to make sure again, I thank my sponsor, Red Maples, who helps me put this show together. It is because of the company Red Maples that this show even exists for you. So if you wouldn't mind, go visit the sponsor, redmaples.com/assessment. That's red and then the hyphen maples, maples.com/assessment, and we will conduct a portfolio assessment for you to determine where you are lacking in professionalism, proficiency, or profitability of your rental portfolio. Until next time, guys, I appreciate the time that you spend with me today. I do want to wrap up by saying thanks, Travis, online. Most people want to do the right thing as long as the owner is respectful and responsible. That's what Travis had to say on the show. So I want to make sure I acknowledge that. So thank you very much for the comment, Travis. But yes, until next time, guys, go check out the YouTube channel, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Make sure on Facebook that you like the Facebook feed, you share this out. If you have a Facebook community, meaning that you have a community of people that are following you on Facebook in a real estate group, reach out to me. You can share the show in your group, but I'd be happy to have you on the show, and we can live cast or try to stream the show directly to that group. We can figure that out. So, all right, guys, till next time, have a good afternoon. See ya.